Pete Hegseth needs to be fired. He is somebody that has obviously given classified information out over Signal, which is not a classified platform. And almost inexplicably, he wasn't just on that text chain we're all aware of with Mike Waltz. He was also on a separate text chain with his wife and his brother, among other people. So this is an infraction that would get a junior petty officer court-martialed. Certainly the Secretary of Defense needs to be fired for this.
You were backing an amendment to prevent the Secretary of Defense from destroying records and historical artifacts at the Pentagon and in our service academies. Congresswoman, you said in a recent Armed Services Committee meeting that he's taken Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou off library shelves, but left 2 copies of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. Does this amendment have the support to pass?
Unfortunately, we did not see that support in the House Armed Services hearing that we held on it. Again, this does not seem controversial to me. This erasure of history of the service, particularly of Black service members and women, is an affront. I went to the Naval Academy. I served for almost 10 years as a helicopter pilot, as a Russian policy officer. And I will tell you, the idea that somehow service women should not be there is just infuriating when we have seen such brave and great service from so many women, like our former CNO, who was one of the first admirals fired by this administration, and others. So at this point, I am just really convinced that Pete Hegseth is a real cancer on the military and certainly needs to be fired.
As we consider the defense posture of the United States, Congresswoman, President Trump today is requesting a record $1 trillion national security budget. Is that level of spending justified in the next fiscal year?
Well, I don't think we saw the $150 billion supplemental well justified because we didn't have the safeguards in place as to where it would go. We, in the hearing, tried to make sure that we understood exactly what was being funded. There wasn't a lot of clarity, and there weren't enough guardrails. So simply dumping $150 billion, much less $1 trillion, onto this Pentagon, when we have a Secretary of Defense that has proven to be very incompetent, many of the top leaders having resigned, at this point, we don't have a new chief of naval operations. I'm not sure anybody at this point wants that job because of the chaos that we're seeing at the top in the Pentagon. So we really, I think, have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of concerns as a member of the House Armed Services Committee about what the proposals are in this budget and what they will be funding.
Well, it becomes a question as well of what it is we're spending this money on, regardless of the spending level. Congresswoman, I know this is a debate that you're involved in on armed services. There was reporting recently that Elon Musk actually advised Secretary Hegseth on procurement, that we should be spending less money on the weapon systems and platforms of the Cold War and investing more in drones and hypersonic missiles. Is he right?
I think that there's some truth in there. I think what we saw, especially as we watched Ukraine, we saw how important some of these drones and new technologies are. I think the procurement process at the Pentagon is something that I've been very concerned about for years, and I think we can do a lot better. My concern, though, with somebody like Elon Musk advising this is the debacle that he's created with the DOGE process, which has not been thoughtful at all, which has actually fired a lot of people that are critical to the running of our country, people like air traffic controllers or people at the FDA or the NIH. So I would be very concerned about having Elon Musk run this process. And that's why at the hearing we just had in Armed Services, we wanted to understand what DOGE was doing in the military. We've got no clarity on that, which is just once again related to my concerns about what's going on in the Pentagon, especially under Secretary Hegseth.
Congresswoman, I'd like to ask you as well about the budget reconciliation process that is well underway on Capitol Hill, though it is kind of one party only. Democrats don't really seem to be playing a role here. But I wonder, when you consider your constituents at home in New Jersey, if you still think they might actually be net beneficiaries of this ultimate tax package, if it is to include a lifting of the SALT cap.
I think overall they will probably lose out, because what we're seeing is a $6 trillion addition to the deficit, higher than anything we saw under the Inflation Reduction Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CARES Act combined. And in fact, this huge increase of the deficit, while at the same time not funding some of the really basic priorities of our state. 1 in 3 children use Medicaid as their insurance. Many of our nursing homes use Medicaid to care for people at the end of their life. Many families are relying on that nursing home care for their loved ones. So we also see these hits to the Department of Education and the Title I funding, a lot of funding that goes to the disabled community. I hear from that community quite often about what the future holds for them. And then at the same time, beyond just what we're seeing in reconciliation, we're seeing these huge hits to the economy of New Jersey that are ongoing because of the tariff regime and the chaos coming out of Washington. So I'm hearing from everyone from a coffee shop in my town saying costs are going to go up, to a builder in my area who's saying I've stopped all my projects because HVAC systems are going up 30 to 40%. And then, as concerning, we're seeing the world community is becoming really infuriated by the destabilization of the world economy by the United States. So we're hearing Canadian tourists are not going to come down the shore this summer, which is going to be a huge hit to our economy. We're also hearing from, manufacturers that I was talking to one manufacturer saying, look, I had these orders from Germany. They just called me to cancel the orders to say they're not buying American anymore. So I'm not just concerned about the short-term consequences here, but some of the long-term consequences that we're seeing on the ground in New Jersey.
Well, we've spent the better part of this conversation talking about the changing political realities here in Washington. And of course, there are national implications. If you become the next governor of New Jersey, to what extent will you be able to balance what's coming from Washington in the state of New Jersey? Or is this Donald Trump's world?
No, this is why I'm running for governor, because I think we can take a very different path forward in New Jersey. We have so much opportunity in this state. I think building houses so we can drive down housing costs, making sure we're planning for utilities, because I firmly believe that the state that can drive down utility costs and produce the power of the future while driving down carbon emissions is the state that is going to own the innovation of the future. Investing in our broken healthcare system and rethinking how we're delivering care to millions of people. I think there is such an incredible amount of opportunity here to show a different and distinct path away from what we see coming out of Washington. What we see is the attacks on the economy and the attacks on opportunity, the attacks on just rights and freedom coming from Washington, D.C., standing in the breach as New Jersey with a different path forward, which I think is going to be really compelling.